I'm Dr. John Gartner.
And I'm Dr. Harry Segal.
And welcome to another session of Shrinking Trump.
And John, I wanted to ask you, how are you this week?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's so nice to see you. And I was just thinking about our show because we continue to have a lot of interest. And what I found was last week, it was hard for people to find the show. If you put Shrinking Trump in a Google search, even a YouTube search, it was very hard to find.
It was hard on YouTube to find. Yeah.
Oh no, but also
exactly to seek us to find us.
So our producer really worked on it, and now if you put Shrinking Trump podcast into any search engine, it will come up for YouTube as well as Apple Podcasts and Spotify. On Spotify, you can see the video as well as listen to the audio. So tell your friends we're here. We are having this project of trying to help educate the culture, the public about what we see as a dangerous decline of Trump's cognitive functioning, which is happening in addition to a severe personality disorder known as malignant narcissism. So that's my summary of the show, John. Take it away.
So we're gonna open the way. This is going to be our normal opening, which is each week, kind of like a session. We're going to see what Trump brings up and analyze, but also bring, as you say, to the public's attention, the signs of his psychopathology and deterioration that the lay public may not be aware of or may not be weighing or understanding the significance of, and sometimes also debunking ones that people might be overemphasizing, as you did last week with the 25 seconds of silence. So with that, I want to, before I introduce the first clip, what I just want to say is I've been saying every week that Trump can't go through a week without committing a paraphasia. Okay. And that is important because paraphasias, they're not just funny things on Twitter. These are concrete signs of organic cognitive deterioration, and it can't be a sign of anything else. So the fact that he keeps doing it and doing it more often is a red flag, a smoking gun to a doctor that this person is in a serious state of organic cognitive decline. So I feel like we just need to point it out. Don't need to say a lot about it. So I'm just going to give you the phonetic paraphasia of the week. Just roll the tape.
And it is hardworking, patriotic, and this is something you can say it, and you can say it 1,000,000 times.
I love he says you can say it. Well, apparently you can't say it. And I think he was trying to say patriotism, but it was Patriciafisky. And of course, right, it didn't really affect his ability to give the speech. He's not totally incapacitated, but I'm saying it's a telltale sign. It's a tell. And that's what people need to understand.
And as I've been saying each week, it's harder for him when he's upset, and it's harder with him when it's later in the day. And what's interesting about this week is the number of rallies and speeches he's given have been either in the afternoon or in the very early evening. So they may actually be onto this in the campaign, that he is less likely to slip up.
Harry, are you telling me they've been watching Shrinking Trump and they're taking our advice and we're helping Trump? Is that what you're trying to say? Let's hope not. I do think the Biden campaign has heard our message, though, but we can talk about that later. In their Twitter account, I think they're showing that they get it. They're tweeting out a lot of things about his phonetic paraphasia, not using that name, but showing where he stumbles cognitively. So I think they're starting to understand that this is actually an important political issue as well. But he wasn't flawless. Nonetheless, he wasn't flawless. For example, what one of my friends has called, what Mitch Kleonsky has called the bottle of the Bronx. Let's see the videotape of the bottle of the Bronx. So just so you know, before you, a woman has collapsed in the crowd. So first of all, by the way, Harry, we always need to be sensitive to the fact that some people are listening. They can't see what we're going to see.
Right,
so I just feel need to set it up and explain it to people. So he's at the Bronx and someone collapses in the crowd and somebody shouts, "Water," to aid the person. And he goes, "Oh, water." Okay, so now we can roll the tape.
And the person who
Plenty of time. That's good. Water.
She all right? She okay?
Okay, this is Harry. Sort of reminds me of the joke where actually someone collapses in the crowd and a woman cries out, "Is there a doctor in the house?" Someone steps forward and is like, "Well, yes, I'm a doctor. How can I help?" And she goes, "Well, I've had this pain in my elbow and I've been thinking maybe I should talk to somebody about it." I mean, so in one level, it's just like stunning narcissism, right? A woman collapses in the crowd and goes, "Come to think of it, I am a little thirsty." That would be one interpretation, right?
Yes.
But actually, as I looked at it more carefully, I began to think there might be something neurological going on. It's almost as if he loses the context of why he's seeking the water. In other words, he obviously understands someone's collapsed. He's been asked for water. He goes, "Oh, water." But now he goes into a kind of automatic set of motions, right? To reach the water, to lift the water, to unscrew it, to drink from it. And he's lost the context of why he was looking for the water in the first place. And I was having these thoughts and I thought, well, I don't know. I kept looking at, and then just coincidentally, I get an email from our former guest, Mitchell Kleonsky, the neuropsychologist who specializes in dementia. And he wrote to me to thank me for being on the show. But then he said, "What do you think about the water bottle thing?" And he said, "Now, others will see this as a sine qua non of narcissism, and it might be. But I view this as a frontal lobe symptom of something called stimulus boundness." Stimulus boundness is people with frontal lobe disorders sometimes cannot pass by a light switch without turning it on, or have to pick things up and touch them, or respond to something in the environment that is not meant for them, but triggers their response. In other words, it's the stimulus binds them into a set of behaviors that they associate with it. And so he's already twisting the water bottle cap off as he's standing up. Unfortunately, in the film we showed, there was a little bit of a Midas touch thing in front of us. You can't see, but I've seen it on other films too. I wanted to know when he started twisting the bottle, right? Because did he sit up and say, "Oh, okay, the woman's got water, I might as well take a drink, myself," or is he already breaking the seal before he's even has her in his sight line? And I think he's already breaking the seal. In other words, he's just going into a kind of mindlessly going into an automated set of behaviors.
And there's something strange about his expression. There's a blankness, like as if someone said water and he's thinking, "Are you telling me to have some water?" There's a little bit like that. And there's a blankness to his face while he does it, almost robotic, I think.
Yeah.
And then he comes back into phase, right?
Right. He kind of floats in and out of cognitive reality. And he's very good at improv. So it's like he just picks up wherever he landed. Actually, I want to show this tape again because you probably, the first time you saw it at home, if you're watching, you probably didn't notice these subtle points we're talking about. But now that we've mentioned these points, Chip, can we just show it one more time and maybe you can keep your eye out for some of these things?
Plenty of time. That's good. Water.
She all right? She okay?
Do you see it a little more carefully now, right? That he loses the context of why he's searching for the water, and he just goes into an automatic set of behaviors.
In fact, the way that he says water, someone has said water, and he goes, "Water," and then he almost robotically bends down to get it, as if he doesn't.
Right.
If he's following he's following an order or a suggestion in a kind of robotic way. No, it's interesting to watch these subtle shifts.
So, a lot of times we sometimes take a contrarian point of view here. So some of you who know that he addressed the Libertarian convention, and he was roundly booed for minutes at a time. And of course, there was tremendous sangfroid about this on Twitter. People got a lot of pleasure out of it and joked about it and said he'd been humiliated. But there are ways in which Donald Trump's malignantly narcissistic personality disorder is weirdly like a superpower. Okay. And what I would say is that in this encounter at the Libertarian convention, I would say Donald Trump won. Between you and me, right? We've been watching politics, but between the two of us for like 100 years collectively, seen a lot of politicians booed. Okay. I don't think I've ever seen one handle it well. Okay. I mean, they're just, it throws them. They want these people to love them and they're booing them, Donald Trump, whose whole orientation to life, and we'll be talking to our guest today, Dr. Justin Frank, who's written a biography of psychological biography of Trump about this, about Trump's whole orientation to life being about domination and submission. There's nothing about affection or love or connection. So he doesn't care if the crowd loves him. He's going to dominate that crowd. And he's going to show that he's superior to them. And basically, he turns it around so they're the bad ones for booing. But anyway, should we roll the tape?
The Libertarian Party should nominate Trump for President of the United States. Whoa. That's nice. That's nice. Only if you want to win. Only if you want to win. Maybe you don't want to win. Maybe you don't want to win. Thank you, D-Roy. Thank you. No, only do that if you want to win. If you want to lose, don't do that. Keep getting your 3% every 4 years. The reasons for doing so, policy and politics, are as solid as the Hope Diamond. Now I think you should nominate me or at least vote for me, and we should win together.
He's really unflappable in a way. In the face of aggression, it doesn't scare him.
No.
And of course he attacks the moment he feels attacked, the same way he's been attacking the judge in New York, and anyone who says anything negative against him are always wrong, plotting against him, or are coming up with fake news. But I completely agree with you, John. He won this one because he demonstrated to his followers he's not afraid of being booed. He's not afraid.
And he will get some libertarian votes. Look at the technique. So first they start booing him and he goes, very nice, very nice. So immediately, right, he's not being booed because he's bad. They're booing because they're bad. Very nice, very nice. Okay. Right. And then he goes on to say, only if you want to win. If you want to lose, if you want to be losers, get your 3%, get your little 3%, you little losers. Or you can join me, powerful me, and be a winner. Or you can be these pathetic little losers with 3%. So he's demeaning them. It's such an unusual political technique to demean your voters as a way of trying to get their vote. But it works.
And John, it's funny the voice you're using, but man, is he effective. He was very effective there. I remember watching this on Saturday, and I had to watch parts of it again because it's just so unusual. You're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. Politicians are not used to being booed. Comedians grow up on being booed. They're very good at handling it. And some people say, Bill Maher once said that he was really doing stand-up in his rallies. That's basically what he's doing. He's doing stand-up.
Interesting. Well, again, just to keep you current with the fact that Trump can't go through a week without committing a paraphasia, as we've mentioned, there's another kind of paraphasia called a semantic paraphasia, where you do use an actual English word, but you use it incorrectly. So if we can put this on the screen, this is from his Truth Social post, defense of counsel defense. Okay, you can take that off the screen. Yes, that was my impression. I had to read it, so I had to read it like Trump. But the point is, what he means is advice of counsel defense, right? So he substituted the word defense for advice. And he obviously was having trouble finding the word advice, and he knew he was going to say the word defense later in the sentence, so he just goes defense, defense. He just repeated the word. What you see in some of these semantic paraphasias is there is a loose chain of association. So even when he talks about the oranges of the investigation, well, it sounds like origins, right? So there's some weird connection that you can find in the mist of his mind. Okay. And so here too, he's thinking about a defense. So that makes him think about the defense. So not a big deal. But the other thing I want to point out about this is he did this in writing. Why is that important? Because it's not a glitch, right? It's not a slip of the tongue. It's not an articulation problem. His dentures aren't falling out. He did this in writing, which shows it's a brain problem. It's not an articulation problem. It's a brain problem.
And, people in the audience may not know about sort of the current theories about neural networks. But if you're old enough to remember, libraries, right, where books on the same topic are on certain shelves, right? And neural networks work that way, so that when you're trying to think about a word, it lights up in a way a hallway in a library which has books of the same subject. So if you're trying to think about defense or advice, it's going to light up words that are nearby. When the brain starts to deteriorate because of certain kinds of processes, aging, strokes, different kinds of dementia, it's as if you get in the hallway, but you don't get the right book. You get a different book. You're reaching for a book, and you reach for one that's nearby. So it's not unrelated, but it's not the right book. Does that make sense?
That's right. Very well explained. Yeah, thank you. And we're going to see a lot of that. Just grabbing one from shelf A. So you see there's some connection. It's not random, because as you've often pointed out, the mind can't be random. Actually, it has to follow some sort of chain of association. Okay, well, we're gonna, in terms of our coverage of his demented moments, we're gonna end with this moment of amazing grace at NASCAR. So again, for those of you who are listening and who can't see, let me just set this up for you. So he's at the NASCAR rally on Memorial Day, and they're playing Amazing Grace, and he decides to salute. No one else is saluting. That's not a thing. People don't salute to Christian hymns. You don't salute in church, So unfortunately, for those of you who are just listening, you're just going to hear Amazing Grace on the bagpipes for 30 seconds. But just imagine that Trump is saluting, and he's surrounded by thousands of people who are not saluting. So Trump is frozen there with his hand like this, and no one else is doing it. And I didn't want to belabor it, but we had other tape. There's also tape of him saluting the airplanes that go overhead. And there's reports that he was just randomly saluting people as he walked by. He's been just saluting people all day. So we might ask.
Put your hand down, John.
No, I'm not done. I'm separating here. But why saluting, right? Well, you always like to point out the psychodynamic level of meaning. Well, guess what Joe Biden was doing the day before? He was giving the commencement address at West Point, where they have soldiers who salute the commander-in-chief, where it is appropriate in that context to do so. But because he can't stand the fact that he's not the commander-in-chief and he's not at West Point, he's decided to make the NASCAR rally West Point. Okay, so the Amazing Grace at a NASCAR rally is going to become his commander-in-chief moment. He's not going to let Biden be the saluter. He's going to be the saluter.
Well, and one thing that cognitive psychologists like to talk about is what we call cognitive priming, right? That is, that if people are given a list of words and even some words are shown subliminally on a screen, that cognitive priming allows them to find related words more quickly than someone who hasn't been primed, right? That's how the brain works this way. And so, but when people are suffering from dementia, priming takes on a looser form. So perhaps, listen, this is a hypothesis, but let's assume that Trump did see the speech that Biden gave at West Point. And because we know that Trump watches television all the time, coverage. And he was troubled by it. Like, that should have been me. Then later, that idea of saluting and being saluted is kind of primed. And yet it's not a conscious decision. It's almost as if it's kind of floating in his mind. And then suddenly the bagpipes, which I guess might sound like the funeral of a service. I don't know. And suddenly there he is.
Right.
So the priming of it, I think, led him to do this very strange behavior that really doesn't make a lot of sense if you think about it.
Well, by instinct, he needs to be dominant, right? So it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense or the context is inappropriate. I mean, This week he also said that he would have beaten George Washington and Abraham Lincoln in a fair election. At first, he said he was almost, that he was as popular as them, or almost as popular. He said, "No, actually, I'm more, but I would beat them in an election." So you've always talked about the presidents, right? He feels in competition with all 45, all 44 previous presidents, all 45 other presidents, and he wants, living or dead, he still has to arm wrestle them, okay, to show that he's the bigger gorilla.
And you can imagine how injured he was when that group of historians rated him as the worst president.
Right.
That happened this year. And that's why he's always calling Biden the worst president in American history.
Correct. Well, we're going to move on to our new feature. This is our second time that we've done this. Bad news, good news, where we're bringing you the best and the worst of the mainstream media's coverage of Biden and Trump's cognitive health. Today, our bad news and good news is actually all in one article, because Dana Milbank, the author of this article in the Washington Post, is our good news. But what he's reporting on is our bad news. Can we see the article on the screen? Republicans discover a secret elixir that cures dementia with one dose. Let me have the next slide. Representative Byron Donald's medical education consists of a bachelor degree in finance and marketing from Florida State University. But the Florida Republican played doctor on TV over the weekend, telling Fox News host Maria Bartiromo that after examining President Biden, he suspects the president is receiving a secret medication that makes him appear to be sharp-witted and totally on the ball. Quote, "The American people need to understand if they're giving him some injection so that he can actually look like he's coherent," Donald said. Dr. Donald seems to have not considered the obvious possibility that Biden looks like he's cogent and clear because he is cogent and clear. So first, Harry, so it's a magic elixir. This is a magic medicine that doesn't exist. Okay. And it's not that he's cognitively intact. He's got dementia, but they're giving him a magic medicine that makes him appear cognitively intact.
Yes. Can you imagine that if such a medicine existed, everyone with dementia would be on it? It makes absolutely no sense. There is no medication known to human beings that can make someone have good thinking when they're suffering from dementia or the decline of brain functioning through aging. It is extraordinary, and it's their way of trying to explain the State of the Union address. And also, people from his inner circle, reporters who have spoken to him, all of whom, including Joe Scarborough this morning, said he spent several hours with Biden in the last week talking about foreign policy, and that Biden was on top of everything. And everybody's been saying that. It's so irritating to me. But it's also their way of needing to diminish Biden through a phony idea, boy, that medication would be great. We'd be making, well, the pharmaceuticals would be making a fortune on medication like that. They're looking for medication like that. And you know what? They're not going to find it because dementia is brain damage. No, but dementia is brain damage. It's not that you can take a medication that will make you think better.
Yeah, right. It's not like a cup of coffee to wake you up.
No,
you don't get those brain cells back.
No.
And this is the thing, the thing about the disinformation, they used to just lie. But now the lies don't even have to make sense. They don't even have face validity. You know what I mean? They don't even, it's okay if they're absurd even on the surface. But look, we have to give them a break because after all, this representative is not an actual medical doctor, right? He's just a representative who's just making that statement. It's not like medical doctors have been making these irresponsible statements, right? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, Chip, before I say that, can we have the next slide? A group of House members calling itself the GOP Doctors Caucus is debasing itself to substantiate Trump's fabrication. A few days before Donald's offered his diagnosis to Bartiromo, Representative Greg Murphy, a co-chair of the caucus, told Fox anchor that he, quote, had proof that Biden was drugged. I absolutely believe that from a medical viewpoint, said Murphy, speaking like a neurologist, although he is, in fact, a urologist. I actually have a little bit of good knowledge that had happened, he added. That had captained? Give that man a coherence injection, Milbank says. Maybe we can talk off, and this is what he says to Bartiromo. Maybe we can talk offline and I'll show you something that I think proves that, Murphy offered to Bartiromo. Of course, he's going to do it off camera. Even Bartiromo, a reliable Trump mouthpiece, was skeptical. You'll show me what, she asked. Bartiromo's promised follow-up on this supposed evidence never came through, though she did later repeat for her viewers that, quote, the GOP Doctors Caucus chairman did say, I have experienced this and I know it for sure.
A urologist.
It just goes to show that just because you have an MD doesn't mean you can't be a psychopath.
Yeah.
Because these Republican doctors are psychopaths. They know they're telling a lie. First of all, he knows such a drug doesn't exist because he's a doctor, whatever discipline he is. Okay. Yeah. And also, he doesn't have any personal knowledge of Biden being injected,
right?
And he's not reaching a medical conclusion. He's like, "Is this a medically definite conclusion?" So,
I think he's assuming that because Flomax increases flow, that maybe there's a drug that does the same thing for the brain.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you can see how he would make that mistake. But as long as we're talking about totally irresponsible. Well, it's worth an irresponsible. I want to be clear. I'm not using this term lightly. These people are psychopaths. And by that, I mean they lie. They lie routinely in order to achieve their ends, which are essentially to, obviously to overthrow the government and take over. But they do lie all the time. And as long as we're talking about psychopathic Republican doctors who happen to also be congressmen, I'd just like to remind people, it's like kind of like a Jeopardy, category. Psychopathic Republican doctors who are also congressmen for $40, please. I'd like to talk about Ronnie Candyman Jackson for one moment. As some of you know, he gave Donald Trump the mocha and the dementia screening test, and he can't stop talking about it. Some people may not know that I was actually part of a group that goaded him into doing it. They were originally not going to give him a dementia screening test, but we pulled together like over 100 doctors, and we got a lot of publicity, basically, demanding it because we saw signs of cognitive decline. And Jackson actually did it. So we actually got it's actually one of the rare times we actually accomplished something actually happened. But of course, it was such a narcissistic injury, right? That he's been, instead of it being a screening for dementia, he's turned it into a test for genius, right? That's his genius to turn things around. So now it's a Mensa exam. And of course, he's been talking about how nobody else could do it and how the doctors were amazed. No one ever scored that highly. When it's a test to pick out which one is the lion, he did a really great job of picking out the lion. And the math is things like saying 3 numbers. I'm going to give you 3 numbers. I want you to repeat them. But what he said recently at Mar-a-Lago was that you have to divide 4,052 by 75,155. And then you have to, and he goes through this complicated set of equations that obviously were not on the test. And everyone's like laughing. And then, and this is the point of the story, Harry, and then the camera tilts. And who do we see? But Dr. Candyman Ronnie Jackson there on the stage. Remember, this is the guy who gave him the test. The doctor who gave him the test knows it isn't 17,000 divided by 550. Now, is he looking sheepish? Like Dr. Deborah Birx, when he talked about injecting bleach and she wanted to go through the floor. Oh, yeah. No. I wish I'd shown this footage. Maybe we'll show it some other time. He looks like he's at a hootenanny. He's laughing and clapping and smiling and fist pumping all the time, knowing that the person 6 feet from him on the stage is lying about the exam that Ronnie Jackson, gave to Trump. So the point is, they're all corrupt.
Well, and Ronnie Jackson is the one who gave him this clean bill of health. He's so healthy and strong, and I think it gave a weight that's probably 50 pounds less than his current weight. It was so obviously a lie. So we are facing this. I do think that Trump's pathological lying, and our guest wrote a really excellent book, which includes a long chapter on Trump's lying. Trump really introduced that notion of lying at this scale in politics. Shameless lying that can be easily disproved, and it's spreading. It's spreading to his colleagues. It's spreading throughout the government. And it's very dangerous. It really is corrosive.
Well, what you say about Ronnie Jackson, we wrote an op-ed after Ronnie Jackson's report, basically, excoriating him for exaggerating Trump's cognitive health and physical health. He said, oh my God, he's got the most amazing genes. He could live to be 200, like really? I mean, it sounds like a physical report from a doctor in North Korea, like our dear leader, he's like supernatural,
Right. He's a deity.
Yeah, he's a deity, right? And he also lied about us having heart disease, as well as about his weight, his height, and just about everything else he could lie about. Well, you mentioned our guest. Well, we're very excited to have Dr. Justin Frank. He is a clinical professor at George Washington Medical School. And Chip, can we see the cover of his book? He's also the author of Trump on the Couch. I love that cover art. Inside the Mind of the President. He wrote it when Trump was president, by the way. Dr. Frank, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And actually, you guys could go on talking. I have really nothing to say because you are fantastic. And there are so many. The only thing I would like to have done would be to participate in the discussion because they had so many different thoughts. I'd like to say a couple of them, if that's
Please, go ahead. Yeah.
First off, one, and it's in no order because I didn't get a way of ordering it. But one of the things I want to say about the congressman who couldn't believe that Biden was smart and was assuming that he was taking drugs, and then the other one also assuming it, that has to do not just with pathological lying, that has to do with having a fixed belief confronted by the opposite. And when you have a fixed belief confronted by the opposite, if you are psychotic or if you are a person who has to have that belief, you will see the other person as lying and not being honest, or using a drug, or finding out a way to think of them as cheating somehow, because it can't be true that Biden can think. It's not possible. And it's because of this belief system that leads to not believing. So I have a couple of very quick examples. One is from the play Embedded when George W. Bush was president. Two reporters are in Iraq talking, and it's a very simple exchange. One of them says, "I know he's lying, but I trust him." That's exactly what we're talking about now. With Ronald Reagan, when Helen Caldicott presented him with the actual evidence from the Department of Defense that he had blocked the SALT Treaty, which he did, and she said, "You're against reining in nuclear weapons." He looks at it and he said to her, "That's a forgery." Now, that means he's a false belief. It's not just that he's a psychopath. Trump is a psychopath, and he does have false beliefs, and he's a convinced liar. And you're right, I did write a whole chapter on lying. And lying for him had to do with the fact that he knew at some deep level that his mother lied when she told him she loved him. She never held him. She never comforted him. She was never very available to him. She disappeared for a month when he was about 2 to have the next child. And she was gone for a month because she had a terrible bleed in the hospital and almost died, had to have some transfusions. And so, and then she was very ill and debilitated when she got home. So she was not really able to do much with him. But the point is that one of the biggest psychological sources of lying is when a person is lied to and they understand it. So they start lying to other people. And that is, I think, and I wrote about this at a deep level, this is one of the basic origins of Trump's lying. And so he's going to say unconsciously, "I'll show you lying. I'm going to lie to everybody. And I'm going to show you that I can get away with it. And I'm going to mock unconsciously my mother and make an idiot out of her. And I'm going to just show you, you think you can lie to me? Well, I'll show you," speaking of being competitive, "I can lie to everybody." And then when he wrote that book in 1987 with what's his name's help, Schwartz, he's the guy that couldn't figure out what to call Trump's lies. So they made up a name called truthful hyperbole. Now, come on. What's that mean? Truthful lies? Or there's a kernel
It's
of
alternate
truth.
facts.
Alternate facts, but it's like a version of the true paranoia, because when you're older like me, and I don't know who was old here, but there was an ad on the TV, the radio for Wheaties, and it said there's a whole kernel of wheat in every Wheaties flake. Well, there's a whole kernel of truth in every liar. There's a whole kernel of truth in every liar's flake. So when Trump says something, people can latch on to some little bit that seems true. And that's when he calls it truthful hyperbole. But it's completely lies. Now, to make that link to dementia, the problem is that you not only can't follow your sentences and have the things that you were talking about neurologically, but part of it is also that if you've been a liar for so long, you don't know what the facts are. You don't know what truth is. You're out way beyond psychopathy. You are just a liar. And so it's very hard to remember what you're talking about because you can't keep your mind on the point you're trying to make in terms of the lie. And then you have all kinds of thoughts. One of the early problems with dementia is what's called frontal release, where you have the frontal lobe where you suddenly speak spontaneously and quickly in almost a stupid way, like when he did with whatever it was I was telling you about the other day about having diversity in schools, and he went diversity, and then he'd go diversité. And I just thought this guy's running for president. I thought this was the most idiotic thing I've ever heard of, and very silly. And then he did the same thing when he was throwing the towels when he was president to the people in Puerto Rico. He goes, "I'm very interested and concerned about Puerto Rico." And then he goes, "Puerto Rico." Now, these are early signs of a form of dementia already, which is frontal release, making clang associations and thinking you're making a joke by changing the accent of something. And it's mocking other people. It is cruel in some ways, obviously, and it's a sign of. But I used to think of it not as an early sign of dementia because I'm not a neurologist, although I have my boards in neurology. But to get those is you memorize Mantner and Gatz and then you're done. But But really, I used to think of all the stuff he was doing as projection, that he was accusing somebody else of
Sure.
what he was, and that he was accusing things of being rigged because he was rigging the elections, accusing somebody of this because he was doing this. And he would say to, and Hillary said, "You're a puppet." And he says, "No, you're a puppet."
Right.
It was just unbelievable to me. So I thought his projection was out in the open. I mean, just straightforward. But it can also be a sign of dementia, and it's hard to tell the difference at a certain point because they don't know how to argue with somebody else. So they can't think of an argument to tell Hillary she's wrong, or to talk about, well, the reason he's not a puppet is because of this belief of Putin's that's so different from his as Trump, and he's not interested in doing this and that. I mean, that's what a healthy person would do, but he can't do it. He just goes, "No, you're the puppet." And that's like children on a playground calling names. It's normal for a 6-year-old to do that. It's not.
Well, in your book, you quote him as saying, "I haven't changed since first grade." I love that was my.
And he is saying that, and he hasn't. So the next part of it, there's a couple of other things about all of this that people do believe when they're 3 and 4 that they are Superman. It's normal. It's part of development. It's a way of having grandiose fantasies to compensate for being a little kid, and you can't even stop your parents from going out for dinner in the evening, and you have to have a babysitter. What are you going to do? So I had a cousin years ago, and this is really years ago, who had a little girl, and the little girl was in the Plaza Hotel with her mother, and it was when Nixon was president. That's how long ago it was. And Nixon comes into the lobby, and he sees the little girl and all the press are around him. And he goes and runs over, picks her up, gives her a big hug, lifts her up, puts her down. The mother says, "Do you know who that was?" And she says, "Yes, but how did he know who I was?" That's ideas of reference. She couldn't see that she was just a little girl. And of course, a politician is going to pick up a little girl. Well, Trump is like that. He's crazy. And
there's so much biography in your book. I want to make sure we have a chance to get to it. There are things you talk about his background that I think people really don't know, and I think it would help them to understand him. The first one you mentioned is how cold his mother was. That he doesn't have one warm recollection, not a single warm memory of his mother. And we're talking about this person who really has a vacuum where other people have a soul. Who really is incapable of loving or being loved, who really is incapable of having empathy or attachment. And I think you really explain it so well in your book. It's really, there's this deficit, this maternal deficit.
Yes. There was a book I love the title of. It was a comic, funny book. It was written by some British comedian, and it was called "Filling a Much Needed Gap." And I think that in this case with Trump, he had a gap and he has to fill it. I think you're exactly right. But he has to fill it in a desperate way, which is greed, taking in everything, whether it's money, whether it's screwing other people's wives, whether as an adult, whether it's whatever it is, he has to take it in. And that's why I wasn't entirely agreed with you about his reaction to the booing and everything. I think his reaction to the booing was great. I agree. But it enlivens him. It's not just that we can be amazed at how he recovers, but we don't understand that fills him up. That every attack, at least it's about him. So he can parry it briefly like he did at the UN when everybody laughed at him when he talked about what a great person he is, and the people in the UN laughed at him, remember, and he smiled. This is but it fills him up, and he lives through conflict. It keeps him alive because he's empty inside. So I think that these trials are great for him. Everybody talks about how scared he is. Everybody laughs at him. I really think that the danger we have, and I know you guys were laughing at him too, and I don't like to laugh at him because he is a dangerous person. And the question is, how do we recognize the danger in his pathology? Because it's true he's a malignant narcissist. It's true and the things that happens when you become more demented and it's very subtle, is you become paranoid. And so everything he talks about is not just projection about the election being rigged. He's paranoid that Joe Biden is out to get him. Well, obviously he's out to get Joe Biden, but actually he's now got a fixed idea about Joe Biden. And that's what paranoid psychotics have. And it can be psychotic, it can be demented. I don't know what to call it, but it is demented basically. And so he doesn't believe what he sees. So like I was telling you a story about when I was a first year resident, there was a guy who said he was dead. And, you know, he's schizophrenic in the hospital. I said, well, let's see if I can figure out how to deal with this. What did I know? I was just a beginning resident. So I said, do dead men bleed? He said, no, of course not. So we pricked our fingers. He pricked his finger and I pricked my finger with a pin. And, you know, you can see it come out. And he looked at me and he said, you know, Doc, you were wrong. Dead men do bleed.
That was
it. I said, I'm in the right place or I'm in the wrong place. This is fucking amazing. Pardon me. This is amazing. It's an amazing experience. So this is, you know, this was Harvard. I thought dead men bleed at Harvard. Maybe they do. I don't know. It was just unbelievable. And those kinds of things happen all the time with Trump. He just changes whatever happens to him into something else to fit into his system. And it's very dangerous because when he jokes about being a dictator for one day, he's telling the truth.
Yeah,
and it's just one day. And he's a dangerous person because so many people follow him. So today is the anniversary of something completely different, which is Voltaire's death. Voltaire died a long time ago today. And I quoted a quote from him because it's very much about Trump. He said, quote, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes. Very apropos.
Where we are.
Yes.
Trump is able to do that because he says it over and over again like a big lie. He makes stuff up, he confabulates, and then he gets his people to talk about like alternative facts and all these other things like Kelly Conway and all these people, because people more and more believe it. So that's why this congressman couldn't believe that Biden was smart when he talked to him. It's why Morning Joe couldn't really believe it, even though he said he was amazed. He said, I'm amazed. But why is he amazed when nobody who works with Biden is amazed? He's really good. He's really smart. He makes mistakes sometimes when he speaks, but he's always done that since he was born. He made one horrible mistake in his life that I will never forgive him for, and I really won't. And that was the thing with Anita Hill and getting Clarence Thomas onto the Supreme Court when he was head of the Senate Judiciary Committee. That was the most outrageous thing. And it was at some level, some form of sexism on one hand, and bending over backwards not to seem racist. Because George W. Bush was a genius at sadism, by the way. He would say, you want a black person to replace Thurgood Marshall? I'll give you a black person. Here's a black fascist.
Justin, I hate to interrupt you. We have to stop in just a second. I just wanted to, first of all, I wanted to thank you for your book, which really is, by the way, beautifully written to our viewers. Beautifully, easy to read. You effortlessly.
Popcorn. I call it intellectual popcorn.
Well, you effortlessly apply psychodynamic ideas to the data. And there's one particular passage I really liked when you looked at the way that Trump talked about the death of Hillary Heyer at Charlottesville. And I thought, I don't think we have time to go into the details here, but essentially what you did was to really show the structure of Trump's speech and the way that it was meandering around as a way of trying to avoid whatever feeling that was coming up. Was my sense. It was very defensive language. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, defensive. But he's also trying to express a feeling that he didn't have. It's also that, I think.
Yes, and I was talking with John before the show, which is that I teach a large lecture on adult psychopathology at Cornell. We just finished up, and it's a shout out to my wonderful students. And in trying to talk about personality disorders, the thing about antisocial personality disorder, which is really the malignant part of malignant narcissism, is that in development, the child is often abused, neglected, humiliated, and so identifies with the aggressor
Yes.
as to constantly reenact the infliction of that trauma on everyone else in his or her
That's the
environment, which keeps that child from feeling humiliated, keeps them from feeling traumatized, right?
And it keeps them from feeling disconnected.
Yes.
Do you notice
Yes.
his hairdo is like his mother's? If you look at old pictures of his mother and of his hairdo from 8 or 10 years ago with his flip back, it looks exactly like his mother.
Fascinating.
And it is incredible. So it's not only does he lies to stay attached to his mother and to mock her at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It has several different purposes. And he's going to say, you lie to me, I'm going to lie to you, and I'm going to get the whole country to believe me, and I'm going to just break down every rule and everything because I hate all limits, and I hate everybody who's making me do this. And, we didn't even talk about being thrown out of his house by his father, who said, I can't cope with you. He actually said that. And he sent him off to boarding school whenever he was like 11 or 12 because
Military
he couldn't
school.
cope with him because he was so impossible to cope with.
Sure. He was so organized in that way, right?
And his fear of impeachment was that it was a repetition of his father kicking him out of the White House instead of out his childhood house. And Mueller was like his father, and he was going to kick him out of the White House. So now he's facing all these trials, which again is about his father's trying to get him and how he saw his brother, Fred Trump, who's dead from alcoholism, being attacked by the father for being weak. Why did the father say he was weak? He was weak because he had empathy. If you have empathy, you're a weak person.
Yeah, Justin, you made a really good point in the book that I want to make sure people understand that Trump really comes from a 3-generation crime family.
Yes.
We know about Fred Trump's, shenanigans and all the laws he broke, but a lot of people don't know about Trump's grandfather. Now, interestingly, Trump's grandfather was an illegal immigrant. He left Germany illegally. And you know how Trump is always saying, they're not bringing their best. It's the criminals that are coming over. Well, Trump's grandfather was a criminal. He was one of those criminal immigrants. And I love his particular form of crime, which is that he ran brothels. But what he would do is he would build a brothel on someone elce's land, and then try to appropriate the land by having his brothel on their land. And he did this like 3 times. So, I mean, it's a family that basically idealizes psychopathy. They're a crime family.
Well, and you know why why he was sent away from Germany? Because he was a draft dodger, just like his grandson.
There you go, bone spurs.
He was
probably had bone spurs for 3 generations.
Yes,
it's genetic.
It's a genetic problem in this family.
Thank you, Justin.
I really worry about the kids. I'm worried Ivanka might have bone spurs.
Yeah, I know it's genetic. They need genetic counseling about those bone spurs. All right, Justin. Thank you for coming. We're going to have you on again. We really appreciate it.
Please, thank you guys. You are great. I loved it.
Oh, thank you. Well, Harry,
John, wait. I just. All right, you're right. You start the shrink wrap. You asked the question.
Well, Harry, we're up to the shrink wrap. What have we learned today?
We're doing this show a little self-consciously today. Sort of meta, don't you think? Actually, this discussion with Justin, who was just such a delight, it reminds me of John Heilman's line, who is really one of the most astute political commentators and reporters really living today, I think, which he said, everything Trump says is confession or projection.
Mm-hmm.
And when the more severely disturbed someone is, the more they project and the less they engage in a realistic way with other people and the world. And this is what I tell my students, which is psychotherapists, psychologists are always trying to figure out the degree to which someone is projecting in their personal lives, in their professional lives. And when someone comes in for therapy, usually if they have friendships that work or maybe a marriage or relationship, but maybe they're having problems at work or vice versa. It's because they're projecting in some parts of their life that reflect unresolved issues from childhood, but they're seeing reality in many of the other domains of life. The more disturbed somebody is, the more they project. So with Trump, there's no relationship that's real. There aren't long-term friendships. He discards wives and cheats on them left and right. He's not known as being close to really anybody. And now we're seeing that personality disorder with sociopathic traits begin to be affected by early onset dementia. That plagued his father, and that is now plaguing him and limiting his language. So that's what I think we learned today, particularly with Justin, which is we're starting to see, again, a model of Trump, a complex model that doesn't involve relating to other people for who they are.
And it's a complex model that doesn't involve relating to reality as it is. But as we've been pointing out, and you could hear this in Dr. Frank's very sophisticated and nuanced analysis, but he was admitting to a certain level of uncertainty or confusion because it is a three-ring circus of psychopathology, right? Is he lying? Is he deluded? Is he demented? It's all three. And that makes it a little bit difficult to parse it apart at any given point. Just look at the water, look at the battle of the water, the bottle of the Bronx. We really had to look at the tape very carefully to say, is this narcissism? It's my water and you can't have it. Or is it a cognitive slippage where he really forgot what the task was? He was supposed to be giving someone water, but he thought he was supposed to be drinking water. And we had to really look at the tape carefully to try to parse it apart. That is one of the things we're going to be doing in this show. And it might seem like a very fine-grained analysis, but it's important. We need to understand what's going on in this guy's mind.
Absolutely. And also today we showed him at the Libertarian convention where he held it together, where he was very effective. He mocked the audience. That's pathological, but it's effective. And that's what we keep saying to you each week. I know I keep repeating and hammering it is these issues are intermittent. The cognitive decline is intermittent. The psychopathology is constant. The personality disorder, the projection, the fear of humiliation, the need to humiliate others. I find it so painful after each day of this trial to hear him come out and repeat the same litany of vicious attacks on the judge, on the system, blaming Biden. There's nothing he won't say.
Right.
And because he repeats it, people start to believe it. And that's another thing we have to.
We keep normalizing his behavior. Like, for example, he slept in court today. He slept in court this week. He was sleeping in the court. He said that he doesn't understand the charges against him. But when the judge was actually explaining the charges to the jury, he was sleeping. So there might have, maybe he's been sleeping through the whole thing. But in other words, we've forgotten about the sleeping. We've forgotten about it. We've normalized it. And so the thing I say at every show, and I'm going to keep saying, the Trump you see right now is the best Donald Trump you're ever going to see. Because I can promise you, I can predict, and you can hold me to it, that he will continue to get worse and worse and worse. And we will be documenting it here on Shrinking Trump.
Yes, and we will continue to meet with you. We hope you guys come and see us again next week. Do tell your friends to search for the show using Shrinking Trump podcast. I salute you, John. Amazing grace.
I salute you, Dr. Segal.